then Jerica, and then Crystal, please.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Brianne. I started working as a postdoc with AiiCE in July 2023. Um, Prior to the postdoc, I studied physics. So my whole background is in physics. So I got my bachelor's and my master's and my PhD all in physics. While in grad school, I did physics education research. I was focused on informal physics spaces. But I did take an unconventional route through grad school, and I think that's somewhat important for how I ended up in this postdoc. So I actually, during the pandemic, grad school's already really hard, but then the pandemic happened, and that was really hard. So I ended up leaving grad school with my master's. I started working at a small research firm doing external evaluation work, and then while I was working there, I went back to grad school and finished up. And I kept working at the research firm for a year, but I knew I didn't want to keep working there, and so I started looking around for jobs, and then I was offered this postdoc position, and I was really excited to start in July.
Hi everyone. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Jerica Jimenez, and I graduated from undergrad with a bachelor's degree in computer science, and then I went straight to my PhD, and I did my PhD in human-centered computing at the University of Florida, where I focused on understanding how upper elementary students learn how to debug, specifically looking at how they're able to articulate their debugging process, but also looking at what were the challenges that they were encountering whenever they were trying to debug for the first time using Scratch. And how did I, a little bit about my journey, I really feel that some of the work that I did as I will go a little bit more in detail in the later on, but I feel like some of the work that I did during my PhD regarding like equity work with the Papaya project, I feel like it really helped me, kind of get this postdoc as well. So I would add a little bit more later on, but that's just about me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Crystal Peoples. I actually got my PhD in sociology in 2022 from Duke, but my undergraduate degree is actually in math. So I took lots of math and computer science classes as an undergraduate before I ended up switching to sociology for my graduate work. But broadly, I am interested in understanding the ways that racism manifests in social networks in higher education, particularly within computer science. So I also study racism in computing technologies like facial recognition software. So I really sort of live in this hybrid space of math, computer science, and technology, and I super love it. And I actually heard about this postdoc at Duke because I was already at Duke. So I was very fortunate that I got to be in conversation with people here doing this kind of work, so that when this postdoc opportunity came up, I was able to already sort of have direct conversations with people who would, later on become my supervisors. But I got to do this very, very early on in the process. So that's a little bit of my journey.
Thank you all. So Brianne and Jerica, what resources did you use to find this postdoc? What resources might you suggest others use to find a postdoc? And then can you talk a little bit about what the application process was like?
Yeah, I'll go first. So I was working at a research firm, actually here in North Carolina, in Chapel Hill, and I knew that I didn't want to keep working as an external evaluator forever, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I still don't know what I want to do. But I was interested in maybe working with an informal STEM program or going back into academia so that I could go back to research. And so that meant I was applying to like a bunch of jobs, postdoc jobs, non-academia jobs, just a bunch of stuff. So I remember looking at the usual suspects like LinkedIn, Google Jobs, stuff like that. And then in physics, we have some good job boards through the professional societies, and that probably is also true for computer science, but I don't really know. But through the professional societies, I was looking at job boards as well for jobs. And I applied for a couple jobs. I actually ended up turning down 2 offers because they were in other parts of the country. And I realized after really considering them that I really wanted to stay in North Carolina. And so that consideration kind of limited my job search quite a bit. And so I actually was also looking at the university job career sites like NC State, Duke, like the local universities here in the area. And so I'm pretty sure, I don't quite remember, but I'm pretty sure I saw this postdoc position actually on Duke's website before I saw it anywhere else. And then when I applied, the process was actually quite long, and I was pretty convinced I did not get the position. But I applied in, I think, October when I submitted my applications, and I interviewed in February, and then heard back sometime after that interview. But between October and February, I was like, moving on. I really didn't think I was getting it. So I say that to say, like, the process can be really long, but don't give up. It's just there's different timelines for different kinds of jobs.
Yeah, so I think for me, I feel like while I was doing my PhD, I was involved in the Papaya Project. Me and 7 amazing researchers in early careers, we developed the Papaya Project, which is an initiative towards creating and identifying and addressing inequalities and biases in computer science education. And I feel like working with the Papaya Project kind of led me to this postdoc in a sense. So for me, after like being in the Papaya Project, I used to check LinkedIn here and there to see what people were doing, any grants that were accepted. And actually it was one of my friends that sent me an article saying that Dr. Daly, Dr. Washington, and Dr. Bonilla Silva, they got a grant for postdocs. So I thought to myself, oh, that's cool. Cool. I'd love to work with them. And then I attended 6C. And then that's when I actually went to a session and I was talking to Dr. Washington, and she told me more about like the postdoc process. So I think that some really good resources to find a postdoc would definitely be like networking, and definitely going to like conferences and going to sessions. We're like, just talking to people and just letting them know, hey, like I might be available soon. Do you know of anyone who is looking for a postdoc? And I think some other resources that are actually really good it's a CRW website under career opportunities. They always have like a list of postdoc positions, but also faculty jobs as well. I will also say, like, talk to your PhD advisor and also your committee, because they're in the field, and they probably know who's hiring or who got like a grant. And as well, I think you should also talk to like your network, especially people who have graduated before you, just so you can have like an idea of, just the more people that know, the better it is that you're in the market. So for me, the application process was a little like different than Brianne. I actually missed the deadline because I was sick recovered for like 2 weeks. So then I thought, maybe this is not gonna be for me. So I kind of like took myself out of the race without even starting. And luckily, they gave me the opportunity to submit my application. And then that was like the end of, I think, January. And then I think by March or April, like I think my process was a little bit shorter. So when it came to the application process, like prepping my work, I really look at different essays that they ask. You know, I feel like every postdoc has like different type of requirements, but I took some time to just look at like writing a cover letter, like the research statements, and also like what do I think will be like my prior and potential contributions for that. So when it comes to like the interview, I think I got really lucky because the ACE team, they sent us the question in advance. And something that I did, I just prepped with my friends and I just told them, okay, interview me and like let me know how I sound. Do I like please let me know how can I improve on the questions. And I feel like for me personally, just asking my friends to interview me really helped me become more comfortable during the interview process. And just, you know, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And, you know, but at least I was giving it my best. So I think like that's how I decided like to prep. And like how long was like that patient process for me was around like maybe 3 months, maybe 3 or 4 months.
Thank you both. Crystal, can you talk a little bit about why did you decide that the postdoc was a good next step for your career?
Yeah, sure. So, after I completed my PhD, I was sort of looking very broadly for lots of positions. So I applied to tenure track positions in sociology and in education spaces at R1s, at Slacks. I was also looking for postdocs in sociology and education. So I was sort of casting a wide net, but ultimately just through like applying to so many different places and getting interviews and talking to a bunch of different people about sort of next steps. Ultimately, I decided a postdoc was the next best step for me and my career specifically, particularly because I wanted to do more interdisciplinary work, more interdisciplinary research. So my research interests are already sort of naturally interdisciplinary. Like I do science and technology studies stuff, but very much from a sociological perspective. But as far as like practical experience doing that, I had only ever done that kind of work within sociology itself. I think was really useful in terms of like getting my PhD. But as far as next steps go, I thought it was more important for me to have that practical experience working across disciplines with people doing these things from multiple perspectives. So for me, the postdoc just seemed like a better fit for being able to do that kind of work. And so when I found this postdoc, seeing people, doing race and computing education work, like this felt very much like the next right thing for me. So it was really important to sort of have that perspective. And that's kind of why I came around to a postdoc experience being the next right thing.
Thank you. And I know in some fields, postdocs are kind of standard, like the expectation is that you'll go through a postdoc first. Not necessarily in computer science. Jerica, can you talk a little bit more about why you decided a postdoc was a good next step for you?
So I definitely knew the postdoc was like the next best step for me because I knew that I needed additional training, and I was still trying to figure out if I wanted to be in academia. I feel like I did this as a way to like, test myself and say, okay, if I want to go to academia, this is what I must learn certain things. Like for example, like writing grants. That's something that I knew a skill that I needed to, to develop. And at the same time, I felt since I did like the research with the Papaya Project about like trying to make computer science more equitable, I felt like because of my work with the Papaya Project, the next step was to, to, at a national level, figure out how do we, how do we create more equitable environments for, everyone in computing. So I think it was a little bit of both. It was personally things that I needed to grow as a researcher, but also the type of work that I was doing with the Papaya project. It just felt like it was like a natural like a natural progression. And something that I didn't mention in the introduction was the type of work that I'm doing with an AiiCE, and that is like understanding how people are having difficult conversations about diversity, inclusion, and just diversity inclusive topics. And while I was with the Papaya project, we did a series of workshops, and during those workshops, those different conversations, about, race and who we are in, how do we live within the computer science environment did come up. So I was very interested in understanding, why can't we just have these conversations with each other? So for me, like, that's something that I also took into account when I was selecting, like when I was thinking that postdoc was the next thing for me.
Awesome. Thank you both. Brianne, can you talk a bit about what advice you would give to others who are considering a postdoc, but not sure if that's the right fit for them?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I didn't really know where to go after my job at a research firm. I knew I wanted to go somewhere else. I was not happy with that job. I needed out. I was applying to a bunch of stuff, postdocs, non-postdocs. And the more I was thinking about it, the more I realized I really did like doing research in grad school. And a postdoc is a way to work on research that is important to me. Like, there's decisions that you get to make as a postdoc, and that seemed really important. So I was considering positions that allowed me to work on stuff that was really important. That was like one thing that I was really considering. And so my advice to others would be to look at what kind of research the group is doing and think about, like, if your interests would align with that research, or maybe you'd be miserable. There were some positions I saw where I was just like, no, I do not like that kind of research. And then the other things that I really considered that I think I would advise others to consider as well is location and finances. So I wanted to live where I live now. I wanted to live in North Carolina. I had turned down jobs that were not in North Carolina because I wanted to stay living here for personal reasons. And also, so I had gotten an offer for another postdoc position, and the pay was not enough to that I could support myself on. And so I think really the best advice I can offer is to really consider what's important to you, research wise, quality of life wise, where you want to live, how much money you need to make to live there. And then to not be afraid to turn down offers, and to know when to not apply to something if it's not a good fit. And I know turning down offers, it can be extremely scary, but I do think that thinking about all of those things is really important.
Brianne, just as a follow-up, I had just made a note to ask you earlier, just advice on turning other things down without like burning bridges. Like what advice would you give for that?
I will say that is one of the most stressful things I've had to do. Is to it feels horrible turning something down after you have put in time, after they have put in time, after they liked you enough to offer you the job. I just felt so much guilt doing it. But I every time I did it, I tried, if they called me to offer me the job, I would try to call them back and not just send an email. I think a phone call or a Zoom meeting is more personal. And I also tried to explain exactly why I was turning it down. It was never the person or the research they were doing, but it was usually location, finances, support they had for, there was one position that just didn't have support for conferences or equipment. Like, they couldn't provide a laptop or anything, and that was going to actually be very difficult for me, and I wanted to go to conferences, and so I just thought it was not a good position for me, and I explained all of those reasons. And there was nothing they could do about it because they were confined by their grant funding. And so it was a little bit of a sad situation all around. But I think being personable, explaining exactly why you're turning something down, having the courtesy of like talking to them face to face as much as you can, even if it's virtually, I think all of those things are things that I considered when I was trying really hard not to burn bridges.
Yeah, Crystal and Jerica, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
No, not from my end. I feel like Brianne said, just like making sure that you have set some time aside, just talk to them. That would be like via Zoom or just in a quick phone call, because you never know what's gonna happen in the future. So I was just iterating on what Brianne said for sure.
Okay, awesome. So next question, and Crystal, if you can start, what skills have you learned or are hoping to learn throughout your postdoc position?
Sure. Oh, and I think I meant to say earlier, so I am finishing up the second year of my postdoc, whereas Brianne and Yerika are in their first year. So I'm in a slightly different position postdoc wise. But so skills I've learned. So coming in, I'm a sociologist, right? So I've had training in quantitative and qualitative methods, like coursework wise, but practical research experience wise, I had sort of only been in the quantitative data camp. So I think the most important skill for me that I've learned working in this postdoc has been the practical side of qualitative research. So I've gotten to work on a bigger research project, collecting and analyzing interview data with a team. So practically going through the IRB process, developing an interview guide, right? Training others in how to give those interviews, asking follow-up questions. What does that sort of practically look like when I've taught you how to do this, and then maybe it's not really happening? Like, how do we readjust? Those sorts of things. On the beginning side is really, really useful experience I did not have before this postdoc. And then, now we're in the analysis side of it. And I'm working with NVivo for the first time and learning how to create a code book and triangulating codes with other people. So all of that I think has been like tremendously helpful. I've always been a person who like loves the quantitative work and likes adding in the qualitative to like explain the why a little bit more. But just practically didn't really have the skills to do that. And so getting to do that in this postdoc, I think is just absolutely wonderful. I really, really have enjoyed that experience.
Awesome. And Brianne and Jerica, I know you're a little earlier on, but if there's anything that you've learned or are hoping to learn.
I'll go first. I think that some of the skills that I have definitely seen improvement since coming to the postdoc has been definitely my writing. I think my writing has grown since being the postdoc, and that's because I am actually I actually have a writing coach, and I made it very intentional, to work on the skill. I think like I've also gotten a little better at like public speaking. During last semester, I was able to go to teach 2 classes, human computer interaction classes at Duke. And I feel like that helped me also work on my public speaking. And I feel like overall, I'm feeling like more confident as a researcher. I feel like sometimes like the imposter syndrome does, creep up on me, but then, I have to tell myself, I went to grad school. I'm doing I'm doing amazing. Like, why do I have to, keep doubting myself? And I feel like that's something that, a skill that I kind of want to also improve on is just overall having more like self-confidence in a sense. But definitely since being in the postdoc, I have definitely became more like confident when it came to like as a researcher. And And maybe skills that I'm hoping to get has been definitely how to write a grant. So during our postdoc here, we have actually 2 sessions where part of the postdoc grant, I believe, is teaching us how to write grants. And I feel like that's so crucial, especially if you're going to stay in academia. You most like understand like what is the entire process of like writing a grant. And like, you know, writing a grant has have a lot of different components, and like just learning that, I think it's something that I'm still hoping to, you know, improve upon.
I agree with the grant writing. I definitely, so I saw the grant writing side of things from the external evaluator point of view when I was working at the research firm. And that's a little different because you have a very small portion of it. You're trying to take someone else's ideas and like figure out how to evaluate it. I wanted to see it from, you know, the ground up. How do you build an idea, write a grant, convince someone that it's worth getting money to do it? And so I'm really excited to learn more about that. I also really wanted and still want to get more teaching experience. So I only taught 1 year in grad school. I was really lucky to have funding to move straight into an RA after my first year. But because of that, I get really nervous when I have to teach, and I'm trying to get over that. But I've been invited to do guest lectures in 2 different courses this year, and so that was a great time. And then also part of our postdoc position is that we teach or co-teach a course, and so next year I'll be doing that, and I'm really excited to do that. Also, a little opposite from Crystal. So I had a qualitative background and knew next to nothing about quantitative research, and so I have been learning a lot about how to do quantitative analysis through this position, and I am so thankful that I'm learning because I feel like I can use that moving forward and you know, maybe do some mixed methods projects, and I'm really excited about that.
Awesome. Thank you all. So what has your experience been like with your postdoc mentor? And how has that been crucial for your postdoc experience? How about we start with Jerica, uh, and then we'll go to Crystal and Brianne.
That's good. I feel like so Shani, she is my mentor. Maybe I should start by saying that. But personally, I have had a very like a great experience coming into the postdoc. I feel like coming into the postdoc, like I knew my shortcomings and I knew like where I was overall. And I was very, you know, I was just very honest with Shani to and upfront, you know, about where I was as a researcher and also like the skills that I needed, you know, to improve upon. And I feel like my Shani, she has given me like, you know, grace and also have helped me understand that everything does have to be perfect the first time around, you know, everything's gonna be a cycle. And I feel like it's very important to have like those crucial but kind of vulnerable conversations in order for you to really grow, and like also try not to be perfect because you know that's not like you cannot be perfect, you know, that's like not real in the real world. That's not how it works. But also just to thinking about this is just a journey, you know, like this is how I'm continuing like my improving and just being, you know, honest about where I am. And I feel like I'm very thankful for that. So thank you for giving me grace.
So I work with Dr. Nikki Washington, and I remember thinking when I first started my postdoc position how all of my mentors that I've had have been female, and I think that is interesting. But also like I'm super grateful for it because I feel like um, just last week I had a conversation with Nikki about not sure if I should move for my next position because my partner and his whole family is here, and like I don't know, I really appreciated having that conversation with her. And I feel like I've been able to have those conversations throughout this postdoc position. And so my experience with my mentor has been extremely positive. I do think that with any new like mentor-mentee relationship, there can be some bumps in the road. And so I also think that with working with Nikki, I've really learned like a whole bunch about communication, different working styles. And that's been really great, I think, for me. And so I would say it's been a learning experience, but also I have never felt like I haven't been able to talk to her about personal things or about career steps. I've felt very supportive. And I think that has been crucial because I still don't know what I want to do. And that's a little scary. I have one more year in this postdoc position and I don't know what's next. So we've been talking a lot about that, and I have been feeling stressed, but also been feeling supported and heard. And I think that's been really, really helpful.
And I can just say something really, really briefly. Eduardo Vinha Silva is my mentor this year. He also was my dissertation chair. So I've been working with him for a very, very long time. But what's different as a postdoc versus a graduate student is, I think the really, really useful thing for me as a mentee is to get from my mentor sort of like a redirect or a refocus when I get really focused on some narrow path of like a little side project or side idea that I'm starting to spend a little too much time on. My mentor has done a really good job of sort of like, Crystal, what is it that you want to do? Like, what is the end goal? Oh, then maybe you should spend a little more time following this other path instead. And I've really appreciated that sort of, oh yes, bigger picture, like is not all of these committees asking me to like do things, but like, what is the next step and how can I prepare for that?
Thank you. I'm going to pause this real quick for folks that are on the call. There's a Q&A that you can use at the bottom of the Zoom screen. If you start putting questions in now, we just have a couple more questions that we plan to talk about. But if you put your questions in, we'll spend the rest of the time kind of addressing those as well. So please submit your questions. And Crystal, while you're on the mic, you've had opportunities to mentor some undergraduates. So can you talk about your experiences with that?
Yes. So working with students was always super important to me. So and I think I told all of the supervisors for this postdoc that pretty early on. So they helped me sort of prioritize getting students around, right, for me to mentor and to work on projects together. So I've worked primarily with 2 undergraduate students at various points over the last 2 years, looking at racial disparities in facial recognition software. So one of my students is given a poster presentation at Duke. Another one was able to give a poster presentation at a regional sociology conference. And right now those students and I have turned some of our work into a paper that we have under review. So we've been super productive. And also, like, apart from the productive side of it, right, like mentoring them in, okay, what are my next steps? Is it graduate school? Like, here are the kinds of places that you look, like here's what you look for. Is it one of them is interested in pursuing a law degree, which admittedly I know less about, but I am able to sort of direct them in the directions of people who do, right? So I've had a lot of fun doing all of it, the research and the more like, what's your next life goal? How can we get you there type thing. I highly recommend it. I think it's super fun. It's really fulfilling, and it really sort of helps round out the postdoc experience for me.
Thanks, Crystal. Brienne, what would you say are the top 3 questions you think you should ask during an interview for a postdoc position?
Yeah, I was thinking about this earlier and I brainstormed more than three. But I'll just share three, and then if other folks don't hit on it, I'll come back and share my other questions. So I was also very interested in being able to mentor students, either undergrad or graduate students. And so I know during the interview I asked, are there opportunities to mentor students? And I think if people are interested in that, they should ask that in the interview process. Um, I also asked and think others should ask what support can be offered for the job search. So again, going back to I don't know what I want to do. And so having that support is like really was really important to me. And I think if you're trying to enter into a job search and your advisor does not support you, that can be probably pretty difficult. I don't know, haven't had that experience, but I think asking that in the interview process would be good. And then also, I asked for every postdoc that I applied to if I could speak to a current or past postdoc to learn more about their experiences, because I've learned that current or past postdocs will probably tell you the truth, and so you can know what you're getting yourself into.
Jerica.
So I do have a different kind of question to ask from Brianne. So for me, like understanding like the work culture was really important. So one of the questions that I asked was what was the work culture like working in like the postdoc? I think also mentorship style is also very important for me. And I also asked them about how does mentorship look like for them? You know, like what is the mentorship plan? And the final question that I asked was what type of professional development opportunities were available like during the postdoc period? I feel like it's, you know, since I was saying earlier when I was earlier that I still have some skills that I really needed to kind of work on and improve upon. And since I'm like super aware of that, that was something that was important for me, just finding out like what other, like, how can I further develop those skills? And I think that was important for me to ask.
Awesome. Crystal?
Yeah, so yeah, I sort of have like here's a question I did ask, and then I have some like, ooh, maybe I should have asked about this kind of questions. So in the beginning, you know, as I've said 1,000 times, like I'm a sociologist coming into this space, right? And so it was really, really important for me to make sure that you know, my perspective was something that was going to be valued in the project with the team. That some of the ideas that I had, I wanted to see like how they landed, if they were going to be viable, right? Because I'm coming in from a different right academic background into this space, and maybe norms are different here, right? Like around publishing and research and those sorts of things. So you know, I would say, you know, if you've got ideas, like pitch them early, right? And see if they land, because like a really important part of accepting this position for me was like already knowing that some of the ideas and thoughts I had, potential little projects, were things that were going to be like not just like acceptable, but like things that were attractive to the team, right? So I think that's something that I would try to gauge early on in the process. And then sort of related, right? Like how then does shared data that we collect in this postdoc and like other sort of intellectual property type things get handled, right? When the research lands, when it doesn't land, when the postdoc is over. I think asking all of that stuff up front is going to save yourself a lot of headache down the road, because it's already sort of clear who's doing what, you know, whose names are on what. Yes, this data can go with you. We're going to keep doing these things afterwards. No, this is your data. All of those sorts of things, I think, are important. And then now, sort of things I didn't ask. Just because like I'm finishing up my postdoc, right? I think it would have been useful up front to ask about kind of like what Brianne was just talking about, sort of the transition steps. Like what are the supports? once the postdoc is over, or nearing completion, into transitioning to the next thing, right? Because we all know that the postdoc doesn't last forever. We know we have to go on to something else, but asking your potential mentors if they have a vision for what that looks like in the beginning, I think is gonna be helpful ultimately. So I would echo that part.
Thanks, Crystal. And speaking about what you do after, for each of you, actually, do you think there are spaces in either the academy or industry to continue to do the CS education work that you're doing right now? I don't know if this question meant actual places that are doing this type of research, or if it meant in this current climate that we're in. But why don't we try to speak to both of those?
Yeah, so for me, in terms of like the project that I'm working with in the postdoc so far, we are trying to create a framework to help us understand how like to help support that emotional barriers that come with having different conversations about, identity topics. And I definitely feel like they are that I can continue doing this the research, moving forward. It will be maybe like an extension of that. Since now we're just creating like the framework, and I would like to test the framework and further that conversation about um how do we support like just negative and emotional barriers that people go through whenever they're having different conversations, especially because not everyone is in the same place. So I'll definitely think that I will continue doing the research.
So I come from a physics background. I love physics. I want to get back into physics after this postdoc position. But I've been thinking a lot about how to merge physics education and CS education. And so I'm really interested in informal spaces because I think that there's some really unique opportunities there that may not exist in a traditional classroom structure. And I was just at a conference last week, 2 weeks ago. It was a physics conference, but some people that I was speaking to there were talking about some quantum computing outreach, public engagement type work that they were doing. And I thought that that was awesome. And I was like, whoa, that's so cool, because it's the two fields coming together. And I was talking to a few other people who were in they actually worked for the Department of Energy, and they were doing some public engagement work around alternative energy sources, and some of what they were doing involved a lot of computational work, and they were working with younger kids and developing curriculum and doing some modeling of these alternative energy sources. And anyway, I say all that to say I see opportunities for merging my background and what I'm currently doing in this postdoc, and like continuing to try to merge them even more, and to like move into a position that would allow me to do all the things that I enjoy. I don't know exactly where that would be. It might be in academia, it might not be in academia. Both of the people that I was talking to at the conferences had sort of academia adjacent jobs. Like they worked at universities, but they were not faculty members. They were more like program coordinators and things like that for these other programs. And I think that's really neat, and I do see a path forward.
Awesome. And just for some like concrete spaces that you may or may not know about to answer that question as well. Florida International, MIT Media Lab, University of Oregon, Bard College, UC San Diego, Arizona State, Georgia Tech, Berkeley, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, University of Florida, Clemson, UIUC. Those are places I know offhand that have research related to CS Ed, that those came to mind while we're talking. If you're interested more in the evaluation side, Sage Fox, West Ed, SERP, whose name I can't think of like what that stands for in this moment, are other places that are concrete. Crystal, you kind of have a different where you're coming from and where you might be looking. So to that question, kind of concretely, where are the spaces for what you want to do?
Yeah. So where are the spaces? So it's interesting. Sociology in general is a field that will happily insert itself into all of the disciplines because, I mean, what do? We study people, we study human behavior, and people are a part of all the fields, all the disciplines, right? So as far as like continuing the work in these next spaces, um, our sort of main, I don't know what you call this, like our national association very specifically has a section on science and technology studies. And that group is very different actually than most of the other sociology groups because we have a lot of people who aren't really sociologists in the group. We've got people from all kinds of like techie computing sort of backgrounds within the field. So sociology is sort of nicely set up to have a space where it is pretty common to have to have space for these ideas and to value these ideas. So I am looking forward to continuing to work with that after the postdoc for sure.
Thank you. And I think all of us on this panel know that CS is has a diversity challenge, right? And so with you all being situated in these spaces, what kinds of things help you, or do you feel like you need to feel supported in these spaces? And what kinds of things would you want either faculty or administration or your mentors to know that may have reduced any experiences that weren't positive?
I will say for me, so I went to grad school not in computer science but in physics, and physics also has some severe challenges similar to computer science related to diversity and equity and inclusion, all the aspects. And in grad school, we had and also when I was an undergrad, we had some student organizations specifically for certain identity groups in physics. So women in physics, Black in physics. There were many. I'm not remembering all of them. But for me, that was crucial for building community. And I really appreciated that. And coming into the postdoc position, I think that honestly, just like interacting with everyone I work with has also brought me that same sense of community, and I have been really appreciative of that. So maybe not any formal structure now in the postdoc, but just a group that's very welcoming and interacts a lot, even if it's virtual, even if we don't see each other face to face on campus every day, we do virtually interact. And I think that has been personally very helpful for me. So I think community is really important.
Yeah, just to piggyback from Brianne, I do think like having a building community is very crucial, in any environment. Because I feel like sometimes you might feel like, oh, I cannot just talk to people. And I feel like if there's a cohort of people you will feel like you have people to talk to, especially if you're having like a problem or something. So definitely building community. And I think um maybe also like no, actually, yeah, definitely building community. I don't know where my thought was going, but I agree with Brianne, building community.
Crystal, did you have anything different?
Not 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 really. I mean, I building community is very important, and I've been in spaces where like we have tried to build community and it hasn't gone over well. And so like I'm trying to sort of think at the moment like what are other things that like address the bigger problem, right? Like so often, like at least in my experience, like part of the reason some of us felt we needed to build community is because the space itself felt quite hostile. Um, and so there's like community is important, and I want the space in general to not feel hostile, right? And so like what can faculty or admin do to be aware of that is, I mean, I think if faculty and admin are willing to listen and take seriously concerns when they are brought to them, that's a beginning, very important step. And yeah, I think like learning like who the faculty are, who the admin are that are open and willing to listen to those ideas is important to learn early on. Um, and then I don't know beyond that, but yeah.
No, I just thought of something else. I think, Crystal, you bring up a good point. I think that also for faculty is just providing the students with space to actually, discuss the problems that they might be having, but also take them seriously. Like providing the space, but then also like what is the plan to address those problems? What would it be the plan, right? Or, how do we navigate, but if an issue happened, like how do we navigate that? So that's what I thought.
Yeah,
I
and
also,
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brian.
oh, I was gonna say, I also thought of something else. I think something I wish I would have had more of when I was in my educational journey was a concern for work-life balance, which is hard when you're a student. But if I had like a professor or someone who was in a place of power talk to me about work-life balance, I actually think I would have had a better experience in a lot of cases. And I think it would have been humanizing. Like if someone had seen me for me and knew that I had a life outside of just doing physics, personally, I think that would have gone a very long way.
Yeah, thank you all. And I didn't ask this question for my own, but I think you all are addressing what ACE is really about, right? Is thinking about, right, the institutional challenges that we're up against, right? Not relying on students, postdocs, or whoever to solve it on their own just to survive an environment that's toxic, but seeing, what are those things that are making an environment toxic and trying to address those um, systemically and maybe systematically as well. Um, so I put the offer one more time if there's any other questions from the audience. And while we're waiting on that, we talked about just like your experiences with your mentor. You mentioned, kind of asking other postdocs kinds of things, but like at the end of the day, is there any tips in particular that you would give on saying, hey, this mentor is a good match for me, at least on the outset?
Maybe this is similar to what I was just saying, but if a mentor verbalizes that they actually care about you, I think that goes a long way because there are people that don't verbalize that, right? Like if you never get told that your mentor cares about you, that can be really difficult. And that's hard to suss out in an interview process, but I do think that, yeah, I just think like it goes a long way to like really humanize the relationship.
Yeah, I think that also maybe something to look for is maybe during conversation, especially if it's a vulnerable conversation, if the mentor, supports you, I think that's always a green flag, like as a mentee, like knowing that, you have your challenges and you beat up yourself, I feel like definitely a person who's like who encourage you, to like really look outside and say, you're doing fine, just, keep doing what you're doing, but just relax, because I feel like at least personally for me as a first generation student, I feel like sometimes like I said before, like the imposter syndrome, but there comes a point that you're like, I think like I belong here, so I think like definitely that would be a green flag for a mentor that is encourage brings encouragement for sure.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think the social aspects are super, super important. I mean, the very first thing that came to mind for me is like, do we have sort of like a match sort of personality wise? But then also like the work is also super important, right? So, I've seen people who have been in relationships with a mentor who basically all of their mentees ideas were suddenly the mentor's ideas, and so the mentor becomes like first author on everything, right? And I would think, checking a history of is this how this typically works, and is that okay with you or not something that you want to deal with, making sure you're checking those kinds of things too, like are you being productive together, research wise as well, and like are your ideas still your ideas, is also I think an important thing to look for.
Thank you so much. And for our final question in the minute we have, if you're comfortable, can you just give us the number of how many positions you applied for and how many offers you got? I think we don't talk enough about like what is the scale of these things, and then sometimes that we don't get the things that we go after.
I can speak to this. So I started applying before I defended, and then I started this postdoc a year after I defended. So in the over a year span, I applied for I don't know the exact number of how many jobs, but it was near 200. It was a lot of jobs. Not all of those were academia, I will say. A lot of them were not in academia. I got 4 postdoc offers. I turned down 3 of those. This was the one that I accepted. I also got offers for other jobs outside of academia, and some of those were really hard to turn down. I mean, they were very well paid. They were like industry jobs, like very well paying jobs. But like I said, it all came down to location, and I just didn't want to move. And the numbers for that, I think it's around 10-ish other jobs I ended up turning down. So maybe don't be like me and apply for everything. It's a lot of work, but I really wanted out of my old job. And so there was a lot of motivation there.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I also have heard other stories of people applying for 10 to 15 and getting 1 to 3 offers is some of the range that I've heard as well. But thank you all so much for your time. We are at time. I appreciate your transparency and sharing your experiences and your journey. It's been informative for me in a selfish kind of way, but I hope it's been informative for others as you go about your journeys. So thank you all, and we'll see you next time.